Central Committee. So Central Committee member Professor Jean Bajlan calls it kind of a reverse American exception.
Yeah.
Everything that happens in the world is because of America, good or bad.
Yeah. So the thing that's actually a very good point. So there are two ways of looking at this, right? One is the liberal understanding that there is no imperialism, right? That everyone has full autonomy. America is this benign actor for human rights, for spreading democracy in the world, and so on. And that's of course nonsense, right? We know this. We've known this forever. People who are serious leftists. And the other one is again pointing at real problems but giving incorrect answers. But this crude understanding that the societies in third world are kind of these blank slates, tabula rasas, in which America just switches something on, it completely totally happens automatically. But the thing is, societies and politics and economies are complex, and we have to look at all of these multiple forces which are going into the making of a moment, and then see, okay, how does imperialism structure these moments and how does it not structure these moments, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, because in talking to you, briefly before we even started recording, and from the little bit that I understand about this situation, Imran Khan didn't seem like he was. What would you call him? You say he's not Che Guevara or Hugo Chavez. So there's no big reforms coming in. You actually said he was a center-right figure for years in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, one is this corruption platform. We were talking about this corruption politics issue, right? And this anti-corruption platform is fundamentally, this corruption discourse basically comes from the IMF and World Bank, right? Which they used in the 80s and 90s to basically dismantle whatever developmental states, whatever kind of little welfare state there was in the third world, in different parts of Africa, South Asia, and so on, by saying that, look, all of these elites are corrupt, these states are corrupt, so what do? We hand over everything to the private sector, right? And what is corruption? Corruption is about these bad apples, right? These individuals, which are basically, if these individuals are removed, these bad apples are removed, then, and you just have honest technocratic experts in charge, then everything will be fine, right? This is the kind of underlying basis behind this corruption discourse. And this kind of very simplistic, moralizing, almost individualizing discourse of corruption has been a great boon for right-wing movements all over the world. We know this from Trump. We know this from Modi in India. And of course, Imran Khan is not Modi. He's not fascist. A lot of liberals make him out to be fascist. It's absolutely wrong, right? He's a center-right figure. He has conservative views with religion, women, society, and so on and so forth. What is most his politics, as I said, he actually allies with the military to come into power. So again, not a reform point there. And his economic policies in power, we can have a review of those. But fundamentally, in 2018 he comes into power, and 19, because he's coming into power on the back of a crisis, as I've been saying, a crisis which is long in the making. So in 2019, like every other government in Pakistan, he goes to the IMF. Right? Like every other previous government in Pakistan for the past 10 years before him. And what happens when he goes to the IMF? The usual, right? You do austerity, you cut welfare programs, whatever little welfare programs there are, you cut spending on education, you set a foot moves towards privatization and so on and so forth. Again, I want to emphasize that Khan is not exceptional in this. A lot of the liberal intelligentsia, liberal left people make Khan into some kind of unique monster. Like just like in America, they make Trump into this kind of unique monster, right? Which is not the case. He's basically a product of the failure of liberal technocratic forms of neoliberal hegemony, and which has all over the world is now being taken over by right-wing populist, and because they're populist, they're contradictory forms of hegemony, if you see what I mean, right? So if you look at his policies and power, this is what it is. It's capitulation to the IMF. It is because he's coming into power on the back of the military, on the back of these kind of big sugar mafias, real estate mafias, just like previous governments, he ends up appeasing all of these people, right? So for example, during COVID, the Imran Khan government announces a $2 billion relief package.
Mhm.
Most of that relief package, some of that goes to poor people as well. Again, credit where credit is due. But most of that $2 billion relief package basically goes into the pockets of the construction mafia in Pakistan and the real estate mafia in Pakistan, which is really strong, right? Now, a lot of Khan supporters will tell you that they were welfare measures within Imran Khan's government. So they talk about things like he instituted a health card in different parts of Pakistan where people can basically anyone can go take this health card, go to any hospital, private or public, and get their medicine or treatment done, and the government will pay for through that health card, if you see
Oh,
what I mean,
wow.
right?
Okay.
Right. But the issue, let me tell you what the problem is. Similarly, he does this kind of cash transfer programs to poor people in Pakistan. Now, there are two things here. The cash transfer programs were being done by previous governments as well, but Khan expands this much greater to a greater extent. The issue is this, that the cash transfer programs is happening in this wider context of increasing neoliberalization and privatization and austerity, right? So what is happening is, and this is what we call in development literature, this is what we call the social turn that IMF and World Bank took in the 1990s and 2000s, because they realized that actually all the structural adjustment and austerity is causing a lot of destruction in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia. So let's still do marketization, let's still do privatization, let's still do liberalization, but let's do these little welfare handouts to poor people to just ameliorate this kind of wider destruction that we are doing. You see what I mean? So this is, in the literature, this is what is called the social turn of the IFIs. And the welfare programs of the people who came into power before Khan and Khan's own reforms in power, this welfare program in power is part of this wider IFI social turn, where you do limited amounts of cash handouts limited targeted amounts of help to the poorest of the poor, while the wider context is of liberalization and austerity, right? So let me give you an example of this. The health card I mentioned to you with Imran Khan, which Imran Khan instituted. Now, that sounds like a fantastic idea, right? That anyone can take a health card and go to any hospital, and the state will pay whatever is the cost of their treatment. But that is exactly the American model, right? The problem was that because the state does not discriminate, the scheme does not discriminate between private and public, the incentive always was that people will go to private hospitals, and private hospitals will charge exorbitant amounts, and they will then put that to the state exchequer, and that will basically bankrupt the state. So instead of basically improving the public and universal healthcare system, you have basically incentivized private healthcare providers. You see what I mean? This is almost the exact American model, right? So this is kind of what we call stealth privatization, which was happening in previous governments in other sectors. In education, in the previous government, it was happening in education through what we call public-private partnerships. In Imran Khan government, it started happening in health. And I can give you an example of what happened. So I was reading, there was a report very recently that over the last 4 years, since this health card has come in, the number of C-sections happening in Pakistani hospitals, in private hospitals in Pakistan, has increased by 40 times.
Wow.
Right? So why is this happening? This is happening because private hospitals are now, government doctors in government hospitals are saying, actually, if you come to me, come to my private practice. In private practice, then I will charge you, instead of a normal procedure for birth, I will charge you for C-section, for example, a C-section, and then I will charge that money to the state, to the public exchequer, right? So instead of improving the public healthcare, what you've incentivized is private kind of appropriation of public wealth, if you see what I mean, right? So this is the kind of stealth kind of privatization which has been happening, again, not just Imran Khan government, but in previous governments as well. But what I'm saying is that a lot of these kind of so-called welfare measures are, in the short term, they'll sound really good, but in the wider context, they have destructive effects. And that is why I'm saying that, we need to have a very grounded understanding of actually, okay, let's look at what the measures were in power and how they came into power, what the social coalitions were, and so on and so forth. Sorry for the long.
No. Hey, that's why you're here.